More on that arms deal with Iran. It was an admission that should have made the bells ring and the sirens to scream, but it did not. Declassified FBI documents showing tonight that former National Security aide Oliver North told the FBI 2 years ago that he was actually helping to raise private funds for the Contras from his job in the White House. At the time, that was against the law for government officials to send military aid to the rebels in Nicaragua. But the FBI, including the FBI Director William Webster, did nothing about North's admission. That fact came out at Senate confirmation hearings for Mr. Webster.
His confirmation hearings do suggest that the FBI, and to some extent Judge Webster himself, did not respond to clear warnings to stop Lieutenant Colonel North's improper, if not illegal, activities.
The FBI chief, Webster, said that he never learned about Ollie North's admission that he was aiding the Contras. Webster said that happened because of some trouble transmitting a teletype message 2 miles from one FBI office in Washington to another FBI office. The Senate Intelligence Committee evidently accepted that explanation, voting 15-0 in favor of confirming Webster as the new head of this nation's CIA.
The following is an audio representation of a declassified speech by former CIA Director and former FBI Director William H. Webster, delivered at Bohemian Grove on July 22, 1988. This speech was delivered to people without intelligence clearance, and intended to be hidden from the public. When released, the CIA redacted an entire page which immediately followed this sentence. But, we have had a number of major successes this year. Proposed remarks by William Webster, Director of Central Intelligence, at the Bohemian Grove Lakeside Talk July 22, 1988. Introduction. Fourth time at Bohemian Grove. Personal recollections. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to tell you about some of my responsibilities at the CIA, and there is a certain irony in this for me. At the FBI I spent a lot of time telling the American people that what the FBI was all about was law enforcement, not spying. Now, I find myself speaking to groups throughout the country, reversing all of that, assuring audiences that at the CIA we are not in the business of law enforcement. And then I tell them something about what it means to have the major responsibilities for spying on behalf of the country. The groups I have talked to have been fascinated by their whole business of spying, though I can't take credit for their initial enthusiasm. The public has been primed by newspaper accounts and by a number of popular books on espionage. One of my officers confessed that he didn't know where to put his own collection of books on intelligence, but he figured they belonged somewhere between the fiction and non-fiction shelves. The many stories about intelligence vary, of course, in style and authenticity, but they do have an impact. The other day at a National Security Council meeting, the president turned to me and said, "Bill, I've just been reading Tom Clancy's new book, The Cardinal of the Kremlin, and the CIA is in trouble. We have had numerous offers of help, perhaps in part because of novels like Tom Clancy's. We have applications from qualified Americans, coming in at the rate of 1,000 a month. But, we also hear from those with more enthusiasm than prospects. I recently received a letter that began, to the Honorable Judge Webster, not too long ago I applied for a job at your agency, as a security escort officer. I know that as a convicted felon, it would be difficult to obtain a position of that nature. But there are special circumstances. I look forward to your response. I also heard from a young American with big plans. He wrote, Dear CIA, I am 12 and have been spying since I was 9. I am the leader of 3 kids spying clubs, and I specialize in making codes, and breaking codes. I spy, around my neighborhood, and on my parents. I know a lot about spying, and I love to do it. When can I join the CIA? A real professional. The youngster also sent me his business card. Spying has captured the imagination and engaged the talents of Americans since the Revolutionary War. I have a facsimile copy of a letter that George Washington wrote to Major Tallmadge on September 24. The need for, and the requirements of, good intelligence work. And I may as well confess to you that my own ancestor, Katie Montgomery, was a spy in George Washington's army, and carried messages in her clothing across the enemy lines. And that, as it happens, is my claim to expertise. But as fascinated as Americans are by spying, they are often skeptical as well, and want to distance themselves from the harsher aspects of intelligence. My good friend, General Vernon Halters, former Deputy Director of the CIA, and now our ambassador to the United Nations, describes the view many have of the whole intelligence business. Americans, Hezier observed, have always had an ambivalent attitude toward intelligence. When they feel threatened, they want a lot of it, and when they don't, they tend to regard the whole thing as somewhat immoral. I think his comments are right on the mark. My impression is that most Americans, at this time, want a lot of intelligence. And today, I would like to tell you why, and in what ways, spying has never been more important to our country. It is important in providing intelligence for our, of particular concern just now, is the situation in the Persian Gulf. A situation made even more volatile by the recent incident involving the Iranian Airbus. We are now, and have been, providing daily tactical intelligence support to naval forces operating with the U.S. Central Command. Our support has included reports on Iranian anti-ship cruise missile sites, naval bases, airfields, and coastal defense installations. As a result, our forces have been able to successfully carry out U.S. foreign policy, protecting our own security interests and those of our allies. I might add that we are encouraged by Iran's announcement, earlier this week, that it will accept UN Security Council Resolution 598, which calls for a ceasefire in the Iran-Iraq war. While we welcome this development, the animosities built up over 8 years of bitter conflict will not suddenly disappear. There is no doubt that a difficult process lies ahead in getting both Iran and Iraq to comply fully with the terms of a ceasefire agreement, and subsequently work toward a peace treaty. I recently returned from a 2-week trip to Western Europe, where I met with representatives of our armed forces and NATO allies. This trip reinforced for me the immense value of our intelligence support, not only within the U.S. intelligence and policy community, but within NATO. Visits I have made within our own country have also brought home the importance of intelligence to our national defense. Some of you may have had an opportunity to visit NORAD, one of our principal early warning systems. NORAD is located, as you know, in the Cheyenne Mountains in Colorado Springs. My good friend, Bobby Inman, urged me to visit NORAD soon after I became the director of the CIA. A day that can't help but make one aware of the importance of early warnings in terms of survival. We must now think in terms of minutes rather than hours or days. I have visited other defense facilities, including the Strategic Air Command in Omaha, and St. Clement in Norfolk. There is no question that intelligence is extremely important to the commanders and staffs of these vital military installations. At St. Clement, I spent some time on the aircraft carrier, John F. Kennedy, and on a nuclear submarine. Things are sure different than they were when I served as a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy. I could not then have imagined either the military or the technical capabilities that we have today. Our nation's satellites, for example, have the ability to identify B-52s, garrison forces, or even a group of people like those gathered around this lake. And nowhere has the importance of our technical capabilities been more evident than in our work in the area of arms control. The CIA was a major player in the conclusion of the INF Treaty, the first treaty in history that calls for the destruction of an entire class of weapons. We provided expertise to the U.S. negotiating team in Geneva, and furnished both Congress and their administration with critical information throughout the ratification process. Our analysts have played a major role in the overall verification effort, and we have given analytical and training support to those who are participating in on-site inspections. But we know that the INF Treaty is only the beginning. Arms control issues verification and the monitoring will continue to drive the resources of the agency well into the next decade, and probably the next century. Through timely intelligence collection and analysis, the agency has provided advanced warning of weapons and weapons systems acquired throughout the world. For example, we gave advance warning of the most recent Iraqi offensives in the Iran-Iraq war, correctly analyzing the increased reliance on chemical weapons. We also discovered the sale and impending shipment of Chinese-made ballistic missiles to Saudi Arabia. By piecing together evidence from both China and Saudi Arabia, we were able to tell the complete story, months before any of the missiles became operational. Our on-the-scene intelligence support in the Persian Gulf has drawn high praise from U.S. naval commanders. While much of our intelligence comes from technical means, we cannot do without information from human sources. In fact, providing insights into human motivation has always been what makes intelligence as much art as craft. and it demands an unusual amount of aplomb. I have seen the marvelous devices that can be used in the interests of tradecraft, but I also know that nothing is foolproof. I was recently told of a young officer who was meeting his agent in the dark of night in a strange land, somewhere east of Suez. The two were driving through 105-degree temperature, something like Washington this summer, and the officer was wearing a considerable head of hair, which belonged to him, and a mustache, which belonged to us. This night, as they drove steadily through the muggy air, our man felt the perspiration running off his brow, down his face, and over his lip. Finally, our mustache dropped in his lap. Unperturbed, our man drove on. His agent, in a calm, unhurried manner, noted, "Sir, your mustache has fallen off." The case officer made the only decision a man of savoir-faire could make, a brief "aha." "So it has." He reached onto his lap, picked up the mustache, and put it in his breast pocket. We may have satellites that circle the globe, but the secret of an effective spirit gum still eludes us. But, we have had a number of major successes this year. Next 1 pages in document, denied. My point at the outset was that spying has never been of more importance to our country. But I want to emphasize that how the CIA carries out its responsibilities is of equal importance to our country. We must maintain absolute fidelity to our Constitution, to our laws, and our rules imposed to ensure our citizens that we are accountable. I do not think that the CIA is exempt from this principle. In fact, I believe that it is the key to public acceptance of our vitally necessary work. Under law, it is our duty to notify the intelligence committees of the House and Senate in a timely fashion of any significant intelligence activities. This includes any activities requiring a presidential finding. Just what constitutes timely is a matter of concern both to Congress and to the administration. The House is considered, and the Senate has approved, legislation that would require notification of a special activity to Congress within 48 hours of a presidential finding. I anticipate that the President will veto this legislation. There is a serious constitutional question here. This is not my problem to argue, but it exists nonetheless. Additionally, some allowance must be made for that rare case, where limited delay in congressional notification is critical, to preserve the absolute security of an operation, when, for example, lives are at stake, and third country sources, which supply the information and provide the opportunity to save lives, refuse to allow us to convey that information to the Congress. The President, in his National Security Decision Directive, provides that if he does not notify Congress within 48 hours, he must review the decision, every 10 days. In my experience on the bench, and in the exercise of discretion, I think that the emphasis on review is key. If you exercise discretion, you don't exercise it without review. If you have a duty to exercise discretion, you must review your decision. And in this case, the President has agreed that his decision will be reviewed every 10 days, until Congress can be notified. But the CIA's relationship with Congress on this and other issues is crucial. Because, I know of the need to be absolutely candid with Congress, and the responsibility that intelligence professionals have to protect sources and methods. I have established guidelines governing our dealings with Congress, and I have made it absolutely clear that in dealing with Congress there is no excuse for deception. We will not give half answers or around-the-corner answers to Congress. If there is a problem, we will say there is a problem, and that we cannot answer the question at this time. But we will not leave the Congress feeling that in some way, we have been disingenuous with them. I think tension between Congress and their executive branch will always exist, but we will be able to work it out if there is an element of trust in the honesty of the statements we make. The amount of information we provide to Congress is substantial. 15 years ago we gave 175 briefings to Congress. Last year alone, we gave over 1,000 briefings to the House and Senate on a variety of topics. These topics included arms control issues, international terrorism, narcotics trafficking, even the spread of AIDS in Africa. In the last year the CIA sent over 5,000 intelligence reports to Congress. During the next several months we will continue to provide policymakers and Congress with intelligence on critical issues facing us. Me will be monitoring and reporting on the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan and its effects on that country. We will also be providing insight into what Gorbachev's emphasis on new thinking implies for his own country. and for the world. We anticipate greater instability ahead in both democratic and authoritarian countries, and will be looking at political changes that could affect U.S. interests. In the Far East, for example, the stability of the Philippines continues to be a major concern. And, in South Korea, which is troubled by internal dissent and the threat of hostile action from the north, we will be even more watchful as the Olympic Games in Seoul approach. In the Persian Gulf, we expect political infighting to intensify when Khomeini dies. We cannot anticipate all the demands that will be made of us, no matter how, or where, we serve. One day, the leader of the military band at a major U.S. international command called CIA headquarters to see whether the agency had the score of the national anthem of a small African country. One of the senior leaders from that country was paying the command a visit. Sure enough, our library had the national anthem, and told the band leader so. There was a long pause on the telephone while the band leader was presumably thinking how he would get the necessary music. Finally, he blurted out, "Could you sing it to me? Please?" I don't know how well the researcher was able to sing the anthem, but I know we answered the request, and given the quality of the people I've seen during my 14 months at the CIA, it doesn't surprise me that we were able to respond. Our machines, our systems, and our satellites are the wonders of the age. But intelligence is preeminently an affair of people. It is the caliber of the men and women of American intelligence, their creativity, determination, brilliance, and courage, that spells the difference between success and failure. I hope that we continue to attract those best suited to carry out our mission. People who are risk-takers, but not risk-seekers. People who are dedicated and responsive to our law and discipline. People who understand and play by the rules. People to whom fame and fortune is not particularly a necessary part of their life, but who can find in our work an avenue to pursue their highest aspirations for a safer and a better world. With such people, we can continue to provide the intelligence that policymakers need to make wise decisions, in the interests of our country. Providing information to make wise decisions is a simple answer to the question, why spy? A more eloquent answer was given by Sir William Stevenson, an old friend, in the introduction of a book written about him some years ago. In the introduction to A Man Called Intrepid, Sir William wrote, "Perhaps a day will dawn when tyrants can no longer threaten the liberty of any people. When the function of all nations, however varied their ideologies, will be to enhance life, not to control it. If such a condition is possible, it is in a future too far distant to foresee. Until that safer, better day, the democracies will avoid disaster, and possible total destruction, only by maintaining their defenses, among the increasingly intricate arsenals across the world. Intelligence is an essential weapon. Perhaps the most important, but it is, being secret, the most dangerous. Safeguards to prevent its abuse must be devised, revised, and rigidly applied. But as in all enterprise, the character and wisdom of those to whom it is entrusted will be decisive. In the integrity of that guardianship lies the hope of free people to endure and prevail. The preceding audio representation of William H. Webster's July 22, 1988, Lakeside talk given at the Bohemian Grove, is presented by Resist the Grove. Follow us at Resist the Grove Action and Resistance on Facebook. Resist the Grove is an affiliate of darkdocs.com and resisttyranny.com. Keep care alive.